Hey everybody, this is Nathan with my lovely wife Kim, and we are here on The Birds and the Lees, which is our little podcast that we like to do about being a family in ministry. We have been in ministry for several years, well, many years actually. Now we're getting up there. And we've done a few episodes so far. We've actually taken a little bit of a hiatus and took a break for a little bit. I mean, what, 6 months?
Well, we did like 2 episodes and then
Well, we have 4.
Do we? Okay,
Yeah, we have
so
4 out.
We had 4, and then we had a hard time figuring out how to tell our story together.
Yeah, and there were time issues and some things like that, trying to get them lined up. So we did a little bit of a regroup, and we decided, you know what, the best place to go is really to the beginning, and then from there we can launch into other topics.
Right.
And maybe have other people join in that conversation,
Yes.
which would be great. We'd love to do that. And so what we decided was we would go back and do this kind of like the chapters in a book, and that's how Kim's described it, where we tell our stories. We start from the very beginning as individuals, and then obviously at some point we come together as a married couple, and, you know, how that shaped us. And, you know, we have lots of experiences, as everybody does, that contribute to the people you are. And so that's kind of what we want to do in these first few. And then from there, we would build into a much bigger picture. And so what we decided was tonight, because my voice is often, if you listen to the other episodes, I do a lot of talking. What we decided was we would give over this first chapter to Kim herself so she can share about herself, and along the way, you know, ask questions, and maybe we can dig deep into that. And hopefully, you know, in a half hour or 45 minutes, you can at least begin to have a picture of who she is, and then, you know, we'll learn a little bit about me later.
Yep.
So, Kim, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just yield the mic over to you and let you go.
Okay. So I was born and raised in Dallas. Family spent most holidays in Dallas, have some in Mobile, Alabama, but we just didn't go there very often. Maybe for once a year or so, just to visit family. Parents got divorced when I was about 10, and very long story short, my parents gave me the option of where to live, at my mom's or my dad's, so I chose my dad's. And I had a great example in a father. He was a really great guy and really steadfast in being a biblical parent, as close as he could be. Had a really good support system of some great friends who walked beside him in that journey, and really engaged him in growing me in biblical ways from the very beginning through his behavior and how he interacted with me.
So he modeled a lot of that to you.
Absolutely.
So if I may ask, because it's definitely not something you hear very often, that a girl, young lady chooses to live with her dad. If that's something you would want to talk about, what was it that stood out about wanting to live with your dad?
I think that he and I had a connection that was just really deep. And my mom is a great person, and she put in her time as a parent for sure. But for some reason, he and I just had a connection, and that worked for us and how it all panned out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's understandable. I think everybody, we love our parents. But, you know, there's affinities to things you're interested in. There's personalities. Right.
And I definitely was a casualty, or not a casualty, but the typical teen where I hated my mom when I was a teenager. And then as I got older, all of a sudden I appreciated her.
Well, and we'll find out, like, you know, as teenagers, it tends to be with guys, we have a thing with our dads.
Right.
And we have this conflict with our dads.
Right.
And I think, again, like you said, that's a teenage thing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, go ahead and so you lived with your dad. How long did you live with your dad?
I did. I lived with him from about 13 to 2 years into college. I went to community college.
Okay, so you stayed at home during community college.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I for those who live in the Dallas area, I went to Lake Highlands High School and graduated from there. Stayed at my dad's house for 2 years, going to Richland, which is right around the corner. Did some ministry there, and enjoyed a lot of what I did there on my own, kind of without my dad's direction, at a different church, that kind of thing. Went to UNT
Mm-hmm.
for 3 years, getting my undergrad in child development and family studies education, and then went on to get my master's in counseling.
Okay. And that's about a time we met, was when you
Yep.
were finishing that up, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to take a step back real quick
Yeah.
and describe maybe. You said you lived with your dad beginning at 13, which is a super formative time, right? You're
Yes.
entering into your teenage years.
Yes.
What was that like? I mean, you're a young lady. All of these things, obviously, you're going through a lot of change.
Right.
Not only just your life is changing, but obviously the physical stuff, and you're hitting puberty and whatnot. What was high school like, and middle school, for that fact, for you?
I think because my dad never remarried, I had a lot of women that surrounded me and really engaged me to talk about the tough topics.
Mm-hmm.
So because there was no woman in the house necessarily, there were some things that I just didn't care about or pick up on
Gotcha.
from men. And often boys or men would like me and I would just not know it.
Yeah, you just didn't pick up on it.
Yeah. And it was not intentional. And I had great friendships. And I still know to this day a lot of the men that I hung out with when they were younger. But I think because of my dad, my closeness with my dad, I can appreciate a really solid guy friendship to this day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've seen that we used to joke when we were doing college ministry that we would have a Bible study at our house, and the boys would come in and sit at your feet to learn all sorts of important things about being young college men, and everybody ignored me. So
Well.
you definitely had good relationships with. I think you have very good, solid relationships with men, and can comfortably and appropriately navigate those. And
Yeah.
you have a boldness to you. So you and I, obviously, this is where, it's how do you dig down in the story? Because you and I
Right.
obviously know things about each other.
Right. Trying to remember what to ask about.
So, you have a dad who is raising a young lady. How did he, we've said you had a great relationship. So how did he do with the just the day-to-day navigating the girls' stuff?
He did pretty well. I mean, when it comes to maturity and the physical things that went on, he would ask friends to help or to, just make sure. I remember some phone calls to friends where he would make sure he got the right things, or he was always willing to step up, and it never embarrassed him.
Yeah.
But he did fine.
Yeah. Well, and that's
I mean, dads, if you have any concerns about being a great girl dad, it is not rocket science. You just try.
Yeah, you just and I'm not always been we have a daughter, and I've not always been the best girl dad, but there's been some joking, humorous stories and things like that, but it really is. It's not the frightening thing that everybody makes it out to be, or many people make it out to be.
Just step up and try.
Yeah. So you navigate middle school,
Yep.
skeleton earrings and all.
Yeah, there is a yearbook picture that I have skeleton earrings on. That's true. It was Halloween day, and I looked super cool in my Halloween. Yeah.
And so
my dad was a big part of my youth group. He volunteered every week and was, I guess, what you could call an interim youth pastor.
Yeah, he would be an interim.
In between, he was more than once the person that kind of took over the youth department for a week or a month while we were in between youth pastors.
Mm-hmm.
And he would run the Bible studies and do all the fun games. His favorite was to do, all churches have their big, either it's a one-day event for new incoming 7th graders for the youth group, or a week event, or one event every week. It just depends how your church does it. He loved planning those. Yeah. So he loved water balloon fights in particular.
Yeah. You've always told me he was the prankster, he was the fun. And even to the point where after we got married, he helped us with events or whatever, and he loved to do that. He just loved to be around students.
Very giving person, and very anything he had was certainly laid out for whatever purpose it could be used.
Yeah. Well, so you make it through high school.
Yep.
Obviously, you had the typical high school experience, right?
Yeah, I went to Lake Highlands. I had a job. I was a lifeguard, and I was a waitress, and I worked at after school care facilities.
Dated 3 guys in one night.
Well, there was an incident one night.
So I gotta make it like surprising and spice things up by throwing stuff at her that I didn't say I was going to bring up.
Nope, didn't say that. Yeah, there was a night where I didn't realize that I was going to meet one guy just to have coffee. And again, it goes back to not realizing what is and is not somebody. So we were going to have coffee, and then I was going to meet a guy to go to a play at school. Once again, I didn't realize. And then after that, there was another friend I was going to go to a party with, and I, at the end of the night, realized what I had done, and I felt terrible.
Yeah. And again, not intentional, just not aware of what's happening.
But I really felt bad that the guy I went to coffee with, I had dropped me off and sat next to me, and at the play, and on the other side of me was the guy.
Oh, I never heard this part. Yeah. Really?
Yeah, so we walked in. He was going to the play and we hadn't talked about it. So we walked in together, and I went to go find the other guy, and the first guy, coffee guy, followed me in where I sat down next to play guy and had one on each side.
I did not know that part of the story, but that story is that much better now.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
so that was when I realized what I had done.
Well, what you're going to find in Kim's story is that relationships are a very fascinating part of her experience.
Yeah.
And, that's you go to college, you go to UNT, and you've told me that, college was difficult for you in many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, so I struggled in high school. That's part of my ministry story, or not ministry story, really my personal story with Jesus is my struggle in high school was very real, and I barely passed. And then college was much easier, and God just really provided some wisdom and grace in how focusing on one thing can really help you get through that time.
Yeah. And we've talked about, obviously as a child, you struggled with a lot of learning issues and learning disabilities and things like that. And yet, you have a master's degree.
In education, specifically counseling.
Yep, which you completed in record time.
I actually completed the program in 18 months. All of my classes were done in 12. It was a very short timeline, but it was just through grace and learning how to understand that my disability does not have to rule my grades.
Yeah. And in the interim of all this, you're living, I should say, a pretty normal post high school life. Yeah. You have relationships with friends. At one point you were mentoring a group of girls, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's so right after I graduated. I can't remember if it started in high school or right after college, but for 6 years I mentored about 20 girls through their junior high and high school experience.
Yeah. And of which one in particular you're very close with today.
Yeah. We still talk when she lives out of the country, but she comes in on occasion and we have dinner. And
we just had dinner about 2 weeks ago.
I get to hold her babies and all those things. So it's really fun to watch those relationships grow.
And it's great when you have a friend who lives overseas in a tropical location and you can go visit her and there's always a beach.
Yeah, but what's even greater is the girl talk on that beach.
Well, yes. Well, I didn't go for that.
Right.
I just went for the beach at one point. So.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. And, obviously, where I'm going. There's a big story that's a very formative story for you. And when we tell it, it either gets one of two reactions.
Are we going to tell it tonight?
Oh, we don't have to tell it tonight. This could be the first part of a part, however many. But, if you had to look back, you know what? We're going to table that one for later.
It's a tease.
It's a tease. You're going to hear about it later. But I do want to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
If you had to go back and look at your life up to let's just say college. Like we're not going to go. We'll do post college graduate level stuff at another episode.
Right.
But if you had to go back and look, obviously there's the formative big events of your life, like your parents getting divorced.
Right.
You live with your dad. What would you say were the biggest lessons in terms of like, and I'm trying to put my head around what I'm trying to ask is what were the, outside of those milestones, those big events, what were the other milestones in your life that may have sprung from those that you developed something that would have fed into ministry and family and life later on?
I think most certainly my dad's desire to serve the church, even being single.
Okay.
One of my hot points I can go on and on about is how the church as a whole does not serve the single community well. As in engaging them and finding places for them in the church that they can just love and serve and be part of the community without feeling like an outcast.
Okay. Yeah, and we've talked about that because in my role right now, I'm the family pastor. And how do you define that in a church where you have many people who are either single, never been married, widowers, however, wherever station they're in life where they live on their own or whatnot. It's hard to, at times to define what family ministry is, and we're having to explore those definitions of it. And I think having known your dad for even the short time that I did, I knew that was a big deal. And the relationships he had with those around him, that was something they always said was he was very willing to be involved in the body life of a church.
Yeah, his relationship with Christ did not change or diminish because he was single.
Yeah, that didn't impact it. In fact, you've told me that that's when he threw himself even more into it, probably more intensely.
Absolutely,
when he realized that now he's raising this girl.
Right.
She's chosen to live with him, and he's raising her on his own.
Yeah.
That he threw himself into it even more as an example to you.
Yeah, and I think there was some... the divorce happened, and no divorce is 100% one person's fault. And he was trying to figure out where his fault was and how he needed to fix that in his life moving forward.
Yeah. So you have your dad teaching you how to serve, which obviously is very much a giftedness. I would say even in the spiritual gift realm, that's definitely hospitality and definitely caring for people, which is what I see. And one of the things I love about you is how you care for people, including your family. But if you were to look back at your childhood, what would you think is the most important positive moment for you, or time period?
Most important positive time period.
However you want to define that.
That's tricky.
Yeah, that is a tricky one, isn't it?
That's big. I think so. My dad gave me a car when I was like 13 or 14.
Why don't you tell him what kind of car he got you?
It was a 68 Mustang Fastback.
Yes. Now, most of us, but
it did not run.
It did not run.
Yeah. It kind of iffy ran.
He had to get it home.
So, no, there was a trailer.
Oh, there was a trailer. He didn't drive.
There was a trailer involved. So the deal was he gave me the car and said it's mine, but I had to make it run. So at 14, I started working on my car on the weekends, and that's what I did for much of my middle school life because we went to high school later. So 9th grade was at the junior high level. So I spent the weekends in the garage working on the car.
Okay.
And that time to grow confidence in who I was as a person and to know that I make okay choices.
Yeah.
And they're choices that won't really hurt me even if I get it wrong.
Well, it's a huge project to be undertaken for a 14-year-old, right?
Right.
You got to have that.
Yeah. So to learn those life lessons, I would say that from 0 to 16 was probably one of the best times of my life because it was just me in that car for many weekends.
Yeah. And your dad was involved in that. I mean, obviously
he
didn't leave you. She have that time together as well. accomplishing something.
But
together.
he would often give me huge tasks that were, you know, you need to get all the grease off of this one area of the car, or in order to go to this next step, we've got to remove this. And so it would take me 3 weekends to do it well without ruining anything else.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, pulling out the radio. I remember that moment when I was like, I finally got
Finally got an original radio out of a 68 Mustang. Yeah.
Yeah, because it needed some work and it needed to be updated.
It's not like the drop-ins we have now.
No. So, yeah, that was definitely the best.
Okay. So if you had to sum up the childhood portion of your life in 2 words, 3 words, what would you say?
Learned.
Okay.
Grace-filled.
Okay.
And
it could be 2 words.
Yep, that we're going to go with
learned
those.
and graceful.
Yeah.
So you're learning, and there was a lot of grace that impacted your life.
Yep.
So, anything else you want to? Because we're making this episodic. So I mean, the
We
childhood
are.
part isn't
I mean,
that not going to be
really,
super long.
Like the helicopter view of
Yeah.
my life was pretty normal family. They got divorced, which to be very real is pretty normal.
Yeah, this day and age, it is very
yeah,
normal.
it was very normal. And the only thing that was truly on a helicopter level abnormal would be that I lived with my dad, but he was very normal.
Yeah, he was. Yeah,
So-
just a normal guy. So
Yeah.
outside of what maybe the cultural perception is, you
Right.
choose to live with dad, and
Right.
there's still people who go, really, that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's pretty normal.
Money was
average.
hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it wasn't.
Yeah. What did that do for you?
Oh, it taught me great lessons.
Mm-hmm. But how about just a perception of things? You know, if money's tight or
If money is tight, it's very stressful on
Uh-huh.
me. Yeah, that's hard sometimes to
Yeah.
know the ramifications of what can happen.
okay.
But I don't know many people who didn't have a chance to go through that. So I would say that's a pretty normal circumstance for most people growing up. That
Okay.
at some point they know that there's a financial hardship.
Yeah.
So
Well, is there anything else you want to add?
no, I think that's a good overview.
That's a good
and
start. Yeah,
just kind of a basic of who I am.
Okay. Well, what we'll do now is we'll kind of end here for now, and we'll coming weeks we'll have the second chapter of Kim's life and kind of where she.
Oh, is that what we're doing?
Yes, we're doing Kim's. I don't know.
There's one reason he wants to do
I
this.
do. I want to get to chapter 2. No, we'll stay here for a little bit, and hopefully, what you'll do is you get to know us, and from there, maybe there's some shared experience and some things that you guys relate to that we'd love to talk to you about. Love to hear from you about. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can reach us at thepodcastinglees@gmail.com. You can check out the podcast on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher. You can go to our Transistor page, but we're on Spotify too. So, hey, we really appreciate you guys listening, and hopefully in this, you guys will maybe, like we said, relate to some things we're talking about. At the same time, maybe it'll spark conversation with you, with your family, with your friends, and maybe even with us, and we'd love to hear from you. So until next time, this is Nathan.
And this is Kim.
And we hope you have a great week.